Of the inner secrets of the Torah. Today, I'm about to present some stories from Hasidic masters, the stories of those pioneers of the Hasidic tradition, Hasidic philosophy, this idea of living by concretizing, actualizing mystical secrets into this world. Let's start. The time to remain silent. The Stroll of Vishnas was in the habit of strolling with his gabbai for half an hour every evening. The gabbai is a person who attends to the synagogue and is the diva. On one such occasion, they reached the house of a certain wealthy bank manager who was in Moscow, who was a follower of the Enlightenment movement. In a word, anything but Chassid of Tzaddik. In other words, he wasn't a follower of this particular leader, or this person's leader. But the Stroll knocked on the door, and when a servant opened it, entered the house. The Gabbai did not begin to understand the reason for this unexpected visit, but without asking a word, followed the Rebbe inside. The host received his distinguished guest with all the marks of respect and politeness dictated by such an occasion. The Rebbe, for his part, took the seat that was offered him, and sat for quite some time without saying a word. Considering that it would be an impertinence to ask the Rebbe directly for the purpose of his visit, the host whispered his question to the rabbi, but was made none the wiser. So he's not answering why. At length, the Rebbe offered him his farewells and rose to leave. As a mark of respect, the banker, the host, accompanied him in silence all the way to his home. But at the last minute, when he was about to leave, his understandable curiosity got the better of him, and he turned to the tzaddik. Rebbe, pardon my question, but it would hardly have been proper for me to ask when we were in my home. So I'm taking the liberty of asking now, why did you honor me with a visit? I went to your house in order to fulfill a mitzvah, answered the Rebbe, and thank God I was able to fulfill it. Which mitzvah? Asked the bank manager. The Rebbe explained, our sages teach that just as it is a mitzvah to say that which will be heard, so it is a mitzvah not to say that which will not be listened to. Now, if I remain in my house and you remain in yours, what kind of a mitzvah is it that I refrain from telling you that which will not be listened to? In order to fulfill the mitzvah properly, one obviously has to go to the house of the man who will not listen, and there refrain from speaking to him. And that is exactly what I did. It seems to be upping the ante when it comes to the mitzvah, increasing the temptation, or making the contact more salient has to be part of the mitzvah. But he has a deeper reason. Perhaps, Rebbe, said the bank manager, you'd be so good to tell me what this thing is. Who knows, perhaps I will listen. I'm afraid not, said the Rebbe. I'm certain that you will not. But when you visit a banker, it's usually for an issue of donation or helping the poor or something like that. But for the Rebbe here, he may indeed be having, he may indeed be telling the truth in the moment. He might be simply wanting to fulfill that mitzvah, and that his intention was not deeper than that. I'm sure he's aware of what is to come, which is asking for money, but usually these tzaddikim are in the clouds of the Torah, in the clouds of the frameworks of the mitzvahs, and so the material purpose may be primary or maybe secondary. I'm afraid not, said the Rebbe. I'm certain that you will not. And the longer the Rebbe refused, the greater grew the curiosity of the other to know his secret, continuing to press him to reveal that which would not be listened to. Very well, said the Rebbe at length. A certain penniless widow owes your bank quite a sum for the mortgage of her house. Within a few days, your bank is going to dispose of her house by public sale, and she will be put on the street. I have wanted to ask you to overlook her debt, but didn't, because of that mitzvah of not saying. How is such a thing possible? Asked the bank manager in amazement. Surely you realize that the debt is not owed to me personally, but to the bank, and I'm only its manager, not its proprietor. and the debt runs into several hundreds. And if so, the Rebbe interrupted him. It's exactly as I said all along, that you were not one to listen. With that, he ended the conversation and entered the house. The bank manager also went home. But the Rebbe's words found their way into his heart, and he gave him no rest until he paid up the widow's debt out of his own pocket. So a lot of things to untangle from the story of the Tzaddik. This presumably was Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. Not the first Kabbalist, but the first, perhaps, Hasidic leader, Hasidic revolutionary. And I suppose there are many lessons to derive from it. Perhaps he was merely trying to fulfill the mitzvah, speaking something that the manager would not listen to, and indeed he could not listen to it. It was not something that was seen as realistic according to his rational perspective. And you can even say that he broke the mitzvah, he violated the mitzvah by saying it. But this was after the pestering of the banker, because the Yisrael had piqued his interest. So how is this thing possible? How is it possible? Well, eventually it became possible. It's quite a complex story. Of noble descent, but of nobler ascent. These are the heads of their fathers' houses. When the Maggid of Mizrich was a child of 5, his parents' home caught on fire and was razed to the ground. Seeing how grieved his mother was, he said, "And if the house did burn down, shall one be so distressed?" "God forbid," answered the pious woman. "I'm not distressed over the house, but over our family tree that was inside it and was destroyed. Our lineage may be traced back to Rabbi Yochanan Hassanbar, the disciple of Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis in the Talmudic era." "If so," replied the boy, "our pedigree will start again from me." The Maggid Mizrich is a very influential Maggid, influential teacher. Carl Jung even once said that the system of his thinking had already been derived from the Maggid Mizrich, one of the key proponents of the Hasidic movement, second to the Baal Shem Tov. The Pedigree of Lubavitch, the son of Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, the first rabbi of the Chabad movement, was the son-in-law of a prominent householder who lived in Chapman's. Once, while still a very young man, he met one of the Chassidim of his father during a visit there, and in the course of conversation made light of his friend's attainments, both in scholarship and in the service of the Creator. The Chassid retorted, "How do you compare yourself to me, who is your father? And who is my father? Your father is our Rebbe, and everyone knows what spiritual level he is at. When it was time to bring soul down to this world, I mean, when you were conceived, his intention was no doubt pure and noble, and he brought down a lofty soul, that is how you were born. Then as you grow up, they watch you vigilantly from all sides, and so you become what you became. What an impressive achievement. For me, you can guess for yourself what my father's mind was concerned with. As for my soul, he probably swiped from the storehouse of souls up there. And after I was born, I grew up like an untamed goat. And now, in order to make a living, I supply the local goyim with the capital needed to buy grain during the sowing season. And then during winter, make the rounds of the villages in order to collect my debts. This has to be done in a certain way. For a start, you have to equip yourself with a bottle of vodka for the road, and you have to travel by night, because in winter these peasants get up while it's still dark. When you finally reach your goy's cottage, you have to start off by drinking the time with him, because without that he won't even begin to talk business with you. And you mustn't forget to fill a glass for his good lady either, or else the shrew is likely to ruin the whole deal. Then you get around to settling your accounts with him. And so you clatter off with your horse and wagon from house to house until you collected your debts from 3 or 4 goyim. At this point, it's time to head for home, to go and dip in the mikvah. and to daven your morning devotion. So you can imagine what kind of praying one must muster. Uh, So you had to do this probably from after midnight to daybreak. It's quite a hard task, even before davening. Now, in point of fact, this chassid served his maker in prayer with all his might and with all of his mind. Though being a humble man, he underestimated his own efforts considerably. When the young dove bear heard his words, he was quite overwhelmed. He returned at once to his father and Liajna to bemoan his own spiritual attainments. It seemed to him now that his divine service was almost worthless. And when the chassid from Janowitz next came to Liajna to visit Reb Shneur Zalman, the Rebbe told him, "I'm indeed indebted to you. You have made a chassid of my bearer." So this story evidently made an impact on Reb Daiver, the son of Reb Shneur Zalman. Indeed, Reb Daiver saw the great level in this chassid, even though he underestimated it. But why? What was the attribute that led him to consider this person so great? It perhaps is his humility to admire Reb Daiver's pure and noble heritage, and he denigrated his own. You grew up, they watched you vigilantly from all sides, so you became what you became. The person had a tremendous amount of advantages in the Hasidic world, but him, not so much. He probably swiped his soul from the storehouse, meaning that he believed that his father, as almost as if created him haphazardly. Now, after I was born, I grew up like an untamed goat. Perhaps it refers to a sinful life, or perhaps it refers to just an unrestrained life, if not sinful, because Hasidic Jews are rarely considered sinful. Um, yeah, the structure of a Hasidic life obviates sin. And now, in order to make a living, I supply the local goyim with the capital needed to buy grain during the sowing season. So he is a lender, and this is something that Gentiles look to Jews with resentment and contempt for. But alas, this is what he did. He did. Um, and there are many non-Jewish bankers also that lend money. When you finally reach your goy's cottage, you have to start off by drinking a time with him, because without that, you won't even begin to talk business. Now, what I think the focus of this, the profundity of this chassid, is his ability to engage with people, his ability to engage with the wider world, and his cognizance, his level of connection with the non-Jewish world, level of awareness, level of experience. The Chassidic philosophy very much looks up to concretization of being in the world. So perhaps that. And I must say, despite all this, he goes to shul and makes his voice heard in the world above. Part 3. A mixed gathering of rabbis, Hasidim, householders of all sorts, once heard Reb Naftali of Rashitz telling of his forefathers, the sages and tzaddikim of world renown. "I doubt if there is anyone in the world," he concluded, "who can compete with me as far as distinguished lineage is concerned, whether on my father's or my mother's side, and if there is such a one, I would very much like to meet him." One of his Hasidim, a Chassid from Steinbergen, took up his challenge. "Rebbe, my genealogy is more distinguished than yours." When Naftali asked him to trace his ancestry, the Chassid replied, "My yichud is that I am My yichus is that I am the only one in my family who puts on tefillin. So yichus is his pedigree, his background, and it seems like his pedigree is not as significant prima facie. Well pleased with his answer, the Rebbe laughed and said, "Gentlemen, our friend from Seinbergen is perfectly right. Allow me, though," he went on, being in jovial spirits, "to explain the difference between a person who has yuchas and a person who is not of noble extraction. Suppose we have a tzaddik who is a great scholar, serving God with both love and awe, who rises at midnight to lament the darkness of exile, then makes his way to the mikvah to immerse himself for the sake of purity, then returns to study both the revealed and the esoteric treasures of the Torah until daybreak. At dawn, like the spiritual lover celebrated in the Song of Songs, his voice is roused and his spirit awakened to an eager flame as he prepares himself for worship, by singing psalms, studying Mishnayos, and giving alms. He now joins the congregation for communal prayer, and his soul cleaves to his Maker, devoutly, sweetly. Half the day has passed and it is time to partake of something. As he prepares to wash his hands before eating, he sighs bitterly. Very well, so I'm about to do my body a favor. But what have I done for the good of my soul? What is the real worth of my Torah study and my level of worship? And then he thinks it over and consoles himself. After all, for the son of a simple man like my father was, it's not too bad, and he is satisfied. But as for me, suppose now and again I happen to rise at midnight, and sometimes study a little Talmud and the legal codes, and perhaps a bit of Kabbalah, or occasionally recite a few songs and go off to prayers. Then, as I come home to eat something, I weigh my deeds and realize I have not yet done anything worthwhile, for it's revealing in this world the awesome unity of Him who gives life to all creation. To make matters worse, I bring to mind the memory of my saintly father and my other pious forebears, and I ponder in the words of our sages, where will my deeds come to equal those of my forefathers? This, though, humbles me no end, as I consider how worthless I really am. This, then, is the valley of youths. So, aside from a point of discrimination that people who have no good family pedigree should be looked down upon, the valley of yuchas should be in a Jewish framework to humble the person and to propel him to greater deeds. This is a positive way of looking at descent. Part 4. A certain tzaddik, whose antecedents were neither high-born nor well-known, was accustomed to travel to visit Reb Shalom of Belz. On one such visit, it seemed to him that Reb Shalom was giving himself airs of superiority because of his parentage, stemming as he did from a long line of Torah scholars, sensing at once that his guest harbored a certain grudge toward him. Reb Shalom turned to him with a question. Who, in your opinion, is more praiseworthy, a tzaddik who is born to an illustrious family, or one whose parents are simple, honest folk? The guest remained silent. Reb Shalom resumed. Our sages teach us that every man is obligated to ask himself, when will my deeds come to equal those of my forefathers? Any man whose forebears were celebrated scholars is thereby made to be exceedingly humble of spirit, for he knows without a doubt that his deeds are still far from being comparable to the deeds of his forefathers. Not so him who stems from plainer stock. Such a one can even fall prey to conceit, for he tells himself, my deeds have already outshone the achievements of my forebears. It was now clear to the guest that the Rebbe had read what was on his mind, and as the Rebbe's yichus, far from making him supercilious, his distinguished lineage made him all the more humble. Well done. It's a good story. Very uplifting and humbling story. But moreover, it focuses the mind. It focuses the mind on the goal of the world, the goal of existence. The goal of existence being to serve God and to climb ever higher on the ladders of Jacob and reaching to the heights.